right, Matthew, welcome to the Founding AE podcast. Super excited to have you on. This is our last one for 2025, so you got in the hot seat at the right time.
No pressure then, right?
And no pressure at all. But really excited to chat with you. Like, I know we've been exchanging messages on LinkedIn. I think you're working in a really interesting space that blends technology with, on the ground, feet on the ground, real world, human to human sales. So really excited to dive in with you here today. Before we get into the meat of it, though, maybe you can give us a little bit, for those maybe that aren't familiar with you, a little bit of your background, your journey, your sales journey, and eventually becoming founding AE at Permit Rockstar. And I understand you're a multiple time founding AE. So maybe a little bit about why you choose to put yourself in this seat over and over again. Would love to hear what draws you to this role specifically.
Yeah, sounds great. So I guess I always forget about this when I talk to people, but I made my first cold call when I was 16. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but I ended up kind of being a telemarketer. It's a long story, but it was kind of a scam. It was not I didn't learn it. I mean, I was 16, right? But anyhow, went to college for economics, got out of school, thought I was going to kind of work in that field, realized I didn't really want to be, behind a computer all day and just kind of locked in my own office. I like interacting with people. So I ended up working at a SaaS company and started out as a BDR and then AE, and it was fintech. And the term BDR, the term AE, and even fintech, those weren't even words we were using back then. So that was 2013, and have mostly been in SaaS sales ever since. And I've mostly worked at small startups, some of them 50 employees. A couple companies ago, I was employee number 8, and now I'm basically FTE number 4 at Permit Rockstar. So I've been able to be a founding AE and be on the ground. And I think it's a lot of fun. It's exciting. I think, the more corporate sales roles can get a little boring, and you don't get to use your brain and innovate and kind of, Groundhog Day. And being on the ground floor of a startup is fun, and you get to do a lot of different things that you wouldn't elsewhere.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're about to reap the rewards of your hard work, that you're building out a sales team over there. You're going to be building that out. So really exciting times ahead. Maybe getting into your beginnings at Permit Rockstar. I was looking at your background. You don't come from sort of a contractor background. I imagine that selling into that field, it goes a long way if you know what you're talking about and you can speak to these contractors in their language, on their terms, really understand their world. How did you get up to speed with that industry and with the day-to-day of a contractor?
Well, I think there are a couple of things, and one I think that is important is I've been a founding AE before in verticals that I had no experience in and had to just kind of learn, right? Whether it's joining groups on LinkedIn, reading stuff, talking with the founders, picking people's brain. You get them on a cold call and you say, oh, they're not interested or whatever. Okay, cool. Well, I got you for a second. Do you mind telling me about, and just kind of trying to learn and ask questions and grow. With this, the construction space specifically, I've been just really lucky and blessed in a lot of ways, and just love my company, and I'm really excited about what we're doing, and especially the people that we have building the team are just awesome. But I'm lucky that our CEO and our co-founders, they both come from construction. They actually don't necessarily have a SaaS background like I do. So I'm bringing certain things to the table that are just they have no experience with, right? And I've been doing for 2, 5, 10 years. And then they're able to, and they've been very patient and all of that, of teaching me about the space, about the pain points. What do people's days look like? What are the problems we solve? What are the different personalities? And so, but I've also, and I think I mentioned this before, rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty. I've always really respected when I've had a sales leader who, when they came into the company, made cold calls, did demos themselves, like interacted with prospective customers and had to do the things that they were then training people to do, right? And so, making cold calls was not something I was told to do, or that wasn't necessarily part of their GTM strategy. And I was like, we need to be doing this and getting reps in so that when I am in front of the right people, I know that messaging, I know what to say, and it just takes repetition, right?
Yeah, and to that point, I wanted to. That's really interesting. So you came in with some founders that had really strong industry background. You were able to use that to get up to
Mhm.
speed, and then you obviously, as a multiple time founding AE SaaS background, came in where you were able to sort of paint your canvas, right? In terms of your go-to-market motion. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. Like, what existed when you came in already, and what were sort of the first things that you needed to get in place to really get up and running there?
Of course, I'm getting a call right now. Good things, people, customers, and people
There you
paying us
go.
or wanting to pay us money, which we didn't have. So that's a good segue. So when I came on, I mean, the TLDR is that they weren't planning on going to market with their product until January of 2026, and for a myriad of reasons, decided to like get the product in people's hands and have real paying customers before I joined about 4 months ago. So uh, they were doing very little from a sales standpoint. And not only were they doing little, they hadn't even really, I mean, they had put some initial thoughts into the go to market strategy, but not a lot. So in terms of what existed already and what kind of had to be built from scratch, oh, I mean, there were a couple of lead lists and a product that was still being built out. And, they had a mission statement and a vision and all of that kind of stuff, but not a lot. We didn't have a CRM. We didn't have a cold call script. We didn't have email templates. I mean, you name it. A lot of that we kind of had to figure out as we went.
Yeah, I think that's also part of the fun part, and what draws people like maybe you and I, right? Is like if all those things were built out and it was just about following the script, maybe it wouldn't be as interesting and appealing to us. But
Mhm.
I've always felt what drew me to this type of a role was the fact that I could build, right? I'm not an engineer. I don't come from a software development background. So when it comes to building for me, it's building businesses, building go to market engines, right? So the ability to go in there and get to the basics of, okay, who are we selling to? Is that the right persona? Like, what is the messaging that resonates with that persona? How do we articulate that through the various channels that we're reaching them, and what channels are those? And then what are the tools that I can put in place to scale this, as now that you're in this position, right? As I bring on new people, right, and get them up to speed, to sort of scale the success of the go-to-market engine. So I think that's what's exciting about this role. Um, Talking about the tech stack specifically, you talked about a CRM,
Sure.
so that's
Yeah.
clearly one of the first things that people like to bring into place. But what are maybe in your mind the like handful of tools that are must-haves at this early stage? And I also want to, I like to think a lot, or I like to advise founding AEs that you don't want to bring every tool. There's so many sales tools, right? You don't need to bring everything into place day one. So what are some of the ones that maybe can wait? Were the handful of ones for you that were okay? We need to get these in place and start using them to really hit the ground
Yeah.
running.
Yeah, and I'll answer that question, but the first thing that I'll mention is you mentioned all the different sales tools out there,
Yeah.
and I think that's a challenge these days. In that, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, there were some top five CRMs, and that's pretty much what everyone used. And then I was an early adopter of SalesLoft, right? And there were
Mhm.
only it was Outreach and a couple, right? And now it's like over the past 2 or 3 years, so many tools have been built. Some that are really good and have market penetration, and some that are very early. And so in order to keep up with, sales tech stacks out there, it basically takes a full-time job. I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and I read about all this stuff, but that's not my bread and butter. That's not, what I was doing at previous companies. And so, but yeah, so that's been a journey, and it'll be part of my journey over the next 6 months as I scale a sales team and try and become efficient as possible and generate as much new opportunities as possible. In terms of, I think the first project we needed was a CRM. We didn't have it. We went with HubSpot for a myriad of reasons. I won't kind of go into that necessarily. I mean, I'm happy to answer follow-up questions there, but we did that. We already had Dialpad. So our founders, they have a couple of other businesses as well. So we already had Dialpad. We got Slack for internal communication, which has been an interesting journey as well. Obviously we have our calendars. We have something called Instantly for our, cold outbound emails. I'm sure I'm missing some, but I think those are the ones that I'm in every day, right? ChatGPT.
Yeah, right. And LinkedIn Sales Navigator seems to be, I don't know if you're using that for outbound. And maybe that's a good segue.
I have premium, but not Nav.
Okay.
But that's one where it's like, how active is the construction industry on LinkedIn? And because I come from legal tech, it's a little different working with top 500 law firms. But anyways, we could go down a rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
But
I'd love to hear actually for the construction industry, what are the channels that work for you, right? So I'm selling sales tech, and as you mentioned, one of our biggest challenges is obviously there's so many tools out there. So competing for mind share is a big challenge. But one of the huge benefits of our industry is all the salespeople that we're selling to, mostly other SaaS companies, right, are all on LinkedIn. So it's very, very easy to find the right people, to connect with them. I'm assuming that it's a little bit more nuanced in your space. So what are the channels that are really working for you today in terms of prospecting?
So fortunately, we've had really good success with all of them. Obviously different levels of it. And all of that wasn't clear until the last month or two, really, right? But we went to an expo, an in-person event. It was called the South Florida Build Expo down in Fort Lauderdale last month. And that's been a huge source of revenue and pipeline and connections and a lot of learning as well. We had started with some in-person events here locally. There's something called NEFBA. It's the Northeast Florida Builders Association. So they were heavily involved in that kind of before I was around. And I was a little bit skeptical that we were going to get many opportunities out of that. And we'll see, what that looks like. But we've gotten some from there, other local events. But we've done it all. I mentioned Instantly. That's really started to take off over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Unfortunately, it all happened at once. So my schedule has been crazy. But our email campaign started doing well. I've booked meetings through LinkedIn. I had a cadence that I built in HubSpot, and cold calls have worked, email, referrals. I'm sure I'm leaving some out, but pretty much all over the place. Paid advertising. We've got people calling in, so it's been really good.
I feel like events are overlooked these days a lot. I remember back in the day when I was getting started, events were huge for us. And I also just loved events because it was, an opportunity to really get in the field, understand your prospects and the kind of landscape as well in terms of other competitors maybe there and so on. And then obviously with COVID and just more, remote work, I feel like that left in certain spaces. Construction feels like that's a industry where trade shows and events probably have remained strong throughout. But I'm excited. I think, especially with AI, especially with a lot of the generic outreach that you're getting these days, lack of human touch for that human touch channel of an event in person to come back. I'm curious, are you thinking about just trade shows, or are you thinking about maybe having your own events as well, where you invite people like smaller? Maybe I've heard a lot in previous episodes with other folks about how those have worked really well in certain
Yeah.
industries, like more I don't know, intimate environments where there's maybe like 15
Mhm.
people or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've explored all of that. And regarding the expo itself, one thing that I think has been a learning opportunity for me over the years, um, is that having a game plan, a really well thought out game plan before you show up at these in-person events,
Yeah.
super crucial. And marketing has all of these things that they're going to control. But I've found, like, getting out to the nitty and gritty and figuring out, okay, if someone comes by our booth, what are we going to do? How are we going to do next steps? All of that stuff. So we had that, and I've been part of companies where either that wasn't my job or that was something that was being handled by someone else, and it was a nightmare, right? And so this last show, we had it all set up so that everyone had a link to my calendar. We were capturing all these leads, but we booked 20 meetings right there at the booth before we ever left, right? Before we ever left town. And anyhow, so like figuring out exactly what you're going to do when people show up and raise their hand and say, express any interest, I think is super important. And you mentioned this, like, you can learn so much in those conversations. I mean, just my pitch, our messaging, all of those things got better and better, so that when I got back to the office, a week later and had demos, like, we were just crushing it, right? And that's the best way to learn, is just reps. You asked about, like, in-person events and things like that, and that's a big part of how I ended up at Permit Rockstar. I ended up fully remote, just kind of as a result of the pandemic, right? And which was great. You can make really good money in sales and live anywhere you want, and go to wherever and work from the hotel room if you need to. And but I started missing some of that entrepreneurial spirit that only kind of happens in person, and some of that human connection. So started seeking that out. And but with the in-person event stuff, we have a number of shows we're going to. When I was in legal tech, these were national, international conferences. People would always, like, fly in for 2, 3, 5 days, and it was really good opportunity to, after the show was over, between 5 and 10 or 5 and midnight, do stuff with current prospective customers, etc. And the ones we've attended thus far, it's not that same dynamic of people flying in and
Mm.
staying in hotels. They're driving in, they're going back to work later, etc. So we have explored trying to, like, build additional, throw an extra day on a trip and host an event, or throw an extra day on a trip and schedule, high value meetings or whatever. And that'll be, something that we'll explore in 2026. And we've also, talked about, getting some of our prospective customers locally to, take them to dinner, do a little presentation, whatever. We've also, I didn't mention this, but we've also done some of our sales meetings. So we really started up here. I'm in Jacksonville, up in Duval. We started our go-to-market here. And so a lot of our initial meetings, or some of our initial demos, whatever, have been in person. So
Yeah.
either we've gone to people's offices or they've come to us, which has been cool. And we were kind of exploring, what's our close rate? Is it different? And, if I've got my CEO driving around town, spending 4 hours for a 60-minute meeting, like, is that always the best, right? But yeah, to be determined. But we're definitely, we're heavily involved in Northeast Florida Builders Association. So we're sponsoring events, and we brought a food truck to this thing. Some of my female colleagues are involved in, like, a women's group there. We go to their monthly, like, board meetings and things like that. So very visible. But yeah, definitely going to be doing some of that stuff next year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the sort of local nature of your go-to-market. Um, I think that's super interesting and super smart way to go to market. I think like a lot of companies make a mistake of uh thinking, oh man, it might be too narrow to start in your case, right? Like in state, right? Florida, that's where we're focused, right? Or in my case, it might be for a certain type of company. We're only going to be early stage SaaS companies. That's who we're going after, right?
Right.
But I've always been a big believer. I don't know if you've follow like Crossing the Chasm, which was like a early, it's dated now, but it was like a book about uh go to market tech that was written maybe in the 90s, but all about like finding that niche that they call it the beachhead, right? To sort of capture, and then there's like this concept of the bowling alley strategy of then adjacent pins that you knock down to capture the overall market. I've always been a big fan of that method, and
Yeah.
I can kind of see it in what you're doing, and the benefits of it obviously in being able to do all these in-person pitches and so
Uh,
on. What was the thinking behind that? I mean, is that something that you thought of? Is that something that the founders, just being based in Florida, they were intently focused on? And what has been your learning so far? And how do you think
yeah.
about expansion beyond Florida eventually? Is
Yeah.
that something that's on the radar yet?
Absolutely. So, and feel free to like, I'm going to try and tackle 2 or 3 or 4 of those questions, but feel free to, I'm sure I'm going to miss some of them. So they already kind of had this vision of starting local before they ever met me. Right. And
Hmm.
I think, so our CEO is a contractor here in Jacksonville. His daughter's the co-founder, and she was working with him after graduating from college. And, um, but, and when I joined, I will say I didn't agree with that. And or I thought it was I thought the ROI was not there in terms of they're pounding the
Hmm.
pavement and spending all this time. Like, hit the phones. Like, what are you doing? How many meetings are you booking here? How many meetings can we? So but it's been interesting. There have been some parts that I think have been really valuable, and some where we're like, we should scrap this. We're spending an hour driving here. We're not getting any meetings, or but relationships are very crucial early on, especially if you've got a new product, don't have a lot of references, etc. If you can build relationships with people that are willing to be early adopters, or are willing to look at your product and say, I think this sucks, or here's what I think you could improve. um, I see that as being valuable. So yeah. But and some other things that have happened locally that so we when you're at a startup, you got to be scrappy, right? Like
Hmm.
um, you don't always have a $3,000 budget for your laptop, and all of these different things. But one of the things we did probably 2 months ago is there was a home and patio show here in Jacksonville, and that's not a show where we would be exhibitors, right? There are roofing companies and handyman companies and contractors and pool companies and that have booths. Well, those are the people that we want to sell to. Those are the people that
Hmm.
we were trying to cold call and email and all of that stuff. And so for 10 or 12 bucks, I got in the door, and I just kind of went around talking to people. I made sure that if they had prospective customers coming up, I would just kind of hang out to the side, let them do their thing. And everyone was rather receptive, and we had some really good conversations and got some opportunities and some deals out of that. Um, and that was something that in my head, I was like, and one of my colleagues was like, hey, this is going on this weekend at the end. I was like, I don't know what that's going to look like, but okay, I'll go check it out. And it ended up being, a really, really good opportunity for us, and, a learning opportunity as well, of just having conversations, practicing our pitch, etc. Um, you mentioned, about the geographic. So first of all, we're licensed. We're able to operate in the entire state of Florida. Our software covers it. Our professional engineers cover it. That's our current footprint, and we do have plans to expand to additional states in the coming years. What's funny is they were initially going to stay in Northeast Florida for the entirety of 2026, and so I think much bigger than that. And it wasn't just me. They realized we could do other stuff, and especially going down to Fort Lauderdale and just. But one of the things that happened early on is we had a lead list. Our owner had just gone out and bought, a couple of lead lists, right? Which is, I've typically in the past used ZoomInfo, or when I worked with the AmLaw 200 and NLJ 500, the top 500 law firms in the U.S. That's a pretty specific list. It's not, but this was different, right? We had a list and we were cold calling, emailing, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff, local companies, right? And we had some verticals like roofing and whatever. And we were hearing different things, right? Some people saw value in what we do. And we kind of have like pieces of what we do. I don't need to get into the weeds there, but I had a hypothesis. I'm like, hey, I know we're having some success here, but this is a small data set. And I think as we might find that roofers in Jacksonville don't see a ton of value in our tool, but roofers in, Miami do, or generator companies and pool companies in Jacksonville like our tool and they don't like it in Miami or whatever. So I was pretty quickly, wanting to, I don't want to stay in that small data set. If we have an ICP that's elsewhere, like I want to go after that. So I apologize. I'm still getting over a sickness here, but yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like I don't want to burn all my energy in one place if there's, better opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, I think what you're hitting on here too is like the importance of experimentation in this early stage role, right? Like it's not one of those that you come in and it's like this is your ICP, this is where to reach them. You have to try these things out, and you have to kind of, some of them are going to work, some of them aren't, right? But that's the nature of the beast, and trying to figure out the direct path to that ideal customer. As I think about construction personas, and excuse me if I'm totally off here, but this is, I've never sold into the industry, but I can imagine them being a little bit apprehensive, bringing new technology being sold to and so on. Maybe there's some objections that you hear frequently. How do you like go about answering or overcoming those objections? And specifically, one thing that I've seen salespeople maybe struggle with, but is something that I've always tried to lean into, is like a clear business case, a clear ROI as a way of overcoming objections or warming up the conversation a little bit, right? How do you think about that? Have you guys developed a ROI framework that you're using to again, build that bridge of trust and credibility with this particular buyer?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and definitely something that's like on our to-do list, right? And there's always, when you're at a startup, like there's always competing priorities, right? I don't have someone to go build me a slide deck. I don't have someone to, create whatever, right? I built our HubSpot implementation after a little bit of help. But I think, one of the things we've run into is that you've got some people who are like, we've been doing it this way. We've figured out the best way to do it based on the current process. Well, yeah. It's like you're riding a bike and you got the best bike. Well, have you seen an airplane? Like, but and then I think one of the things that happened early on for us is we were talking to the wrong people. When I was in legal tech, I could sell up, right? I could start with the practice group chair, managing partner, chief information officer, whatever, and then loop in other folks that needed to be involved. I could also start at the bottom and start with a paralegal or an associate and work my way up, and it was no problem, right? Especially because those end users saw a lot of value in what we did. What we found is that a lot of the potential end users see this as a threat to their job, or they feel like they already have it covered. Whereas when we get the owner or someone that cares about the financials, or wants to improve the customer experience, or is a little bit more big picture thinking, it's easier to have those conversations and we can get further. I also have seen, we have like AI permitting software We do inspections. We do virtual inspections instead of in person. We do something called plan review. And our customers can pretty much like pick and choose which pieces of that they want to use on any given project. And so one of the things from the ROI standpoint is on these demos or cold calls or whatever, we're trying to hone in on which of these is actually painful for you to the point that you're willing to pay for changing it. And not hiding the ball on price, right? I'm used to like waiting to share price like a long time, and we don't have time for that. Like if let's disqualify you right now if it's not going to work, cool. And so, but we also have one thing that was an interesting shift for me is I've been in enterprise for years and years, right? And so going from that to working with like smaller opportunities was for a couple of weeks or a month there, it was like I didn't even know how to handle it. It's like, how do I care about the commission check on this is like, what, like you're gonna buy me a Starbucks, not even, right? Or that's a factor, but like also just like I'm used to like multi-threading and like navigating complex sales cycles with 30 decision makers and just people, different types of people, right? And so but here we work with companies that have one employee or one owner and a handful of employees, and we work with some that have thousands and tens of thousands. And so those personas and the ROI, like what matters to them, can be very different. And so as we scale, I love selling. I don't know that even though I'm going to be in a more managerial role, I don't know that I'll ever fully get away from selling partnerships and big enterprise stuff or whatever, right? It's fun to me. But yeah, for right now, it's like we have to like understand what people care about, position the product accordingly. And we really do need like a ROI calculator or something where I can say, how much time does this save this person? What's the value of them not having to drive 20 miles on the company truck? What's the value of retaining this customer or winning new, a referral or like whatever, but we haven't done much of that yet.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think like you don't start there, but eventually quantifying a lot of the things that the arguments you're already making, right, with figures, right? And then we all know that they're never completely accurate, right? But like if they're directionally accurate and they give somebody a sense of the cost of some of the things that they're doing today, I think it puts you in a strong selling position.
Yeah, and what's funny is some of our early like marketing materials and like slide decks and things like that I didn't build, they talked about time saving, right? And associated value with that. And I was always taught like round down, right? And working with attorneys for years and years, they're very skeptical. So if I round up ever, I'm gonna lose their trust, and I'm never gonna gain it back, and they're not even gonna tell me. They're not gonna say that's whatever. I mean, they probably would, but like you can lose an attorney's trust real quick, and it's just gone, right? But so when I saw some of these things, and they weren't like wrong numbers, but I'm like, you can't generalize that high. Like you've got to round down a little bit. But yeah, it'll be interesting to explore quantifying and talking with, now that we have like lots of customers, like talking with them about, hey, what was it like before? What's it like now? Getting case studies, testimonials.
Social proof. Yeah, absolutely. This has been awesome. Just to kind of maybe cap off the conversation, somebody listening to this, you're a multiple time founding AE, you're now building out a team, somebody that's coming into this role for the first time, right? Any advice on skills, habits, how to deal with the pressure, right? It's a high pressure job. It's exciting, but it's also high pressure. Any advice, that you wish you had coming into your first founding AE role that you think would be useful to share here today?
Yeah, I mean, I think one that I've been like so blessed. I got to give a shout out. Like my current colleagues are just awesome. And when you're evaluating a founding AE role or any sales role in general, like look at the team. Sure, check out the product, get
Yeah.
a demo, read online, but like look at the team. Do you believe in these people?
Hmm.
Our CEO wrote a book. I listened to it on audio. I checked him out on LinkedIn and all of that stuff. And then when we met the first couple of times, I was interviewing him, right? Because taking a founding AE job can be risky. And so I'm really grateful for my team. I spent Thanksgiving with their family. I mean, it's just been really cool and something that I was missing. And I've also been really blessed to have some of just amazing sales leaders over the years that taught me some really good lessons, not just about software or business, but about life, and put up with a lot of crap from me. But one of the things that I learned at one point was like, focus on putting the customer first, your company second, and then yourself third. And that made no sense to me conceptually, right? If I put the company first and that means I don't close this deal, I get paid less money, right? But when I've done those things, it has benefited my career, my pocketbook, my life in ways that I never imagined it would. So I think like not losing sight of that. I also think, I got to work directly under like a CRO of a slightly larger company at one point, and I was like our first US based sales hire. We had
Mm.
some overseas, and so but there was no sales manager. I had no other AEs and one of the things I learned from him, he was super busy. Like he was overseeing product and marketing and all of these, and so he was a great guy. And he would say to me, if I went to him with a question, he's like, "Hey, look, I'm always happy to help you, but before you come to me with a question, do everything you can to figure it out on your own. And then if you can't, come see me." And that taught me that, and this is something that's carried over very well into future roles, is be helpful. Go try and solve problems on
Mm.
your own. If something
Hmm.
doesn't exist, try and build it if you can, right? And take as many, over the past couple of months, wherever possible, I take stuff off of our, C-level people's plates, right? If I can do it, let them focus on more important things. So like rolling up your sleeves, and then, but also like learning when to pass things off and say, hey, I need help with this, or like, can you handle that? It's not really my strength, or it's not under my umbrella. Another thing that I learned at one point being at a startup, and this was like really hard for me to understand, is like at the end of the day, everyone just does their best, and then you got to clock out and like go back to your life
Yeah. Yeah.
and pick it up the next day. So like I was always like very much, I got to send that follow-up email the same day. And like, if the client asks for a proposal or like just whatever, like we got it, or, we got this security review and we got to do it super quick. And like, at some point, a guy I was working with was just like, Matthew, like, I love your passion and enthusiasm for like getting things done quickly, but like, we're all just doing the best we can. And like, at some point at the end of the day, we just got to like say, okay, we did the best we can, and then jump on it tomorrow. Right.
Yeah. No, I think all great advice in general, right? But particularly for this role, I think you hit the nail on the head on all the fronts. Matthew, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time right before the holidays, right at the end of December, end of the year, to come on the podcast, share your experience and your knowledge with us. If folks are listening to this or watching this, they want to connect with you, learn more, or maybe they're interested in Permit Rockstar. They want to learn
Sure.
more about the company, your offerings. Where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. If you just search Matthew Smith, Permit Rockstar, you'll find me. There's some emojis in there. I can be reached via email, and my email is msmith, MSMITH, at permitrockstar.com. My cell is 904-464-1060. You can also go to our website, which is permitrockstar.com. And if you go to like request a meeting or book a demo, it gives you the option to book one with me. So if you want to throw something on my calendar, we'll see what happens. Whether you're a sales prospect or just someone that wants to chat, we'll roll the dice with that one and see what happens.
Cool, cool. Well, thanks again for the time today. Have a good rest of your year, and a great 2026 ahead of you.
Thanks so much, Justin.